I guess one of the things I was reflecting on about is that I guess over the years, the stuff that we've done together, that like we've been done some exciting projects and some really interesting challenges, but like nothing like the stuff that leaders have been facing since 2020, and it just feels a very, very different place. And I guess just love to hear kind of how it's felt like for you since turning up at ISG, really, and just how that's been in a very turbulent time.
It's interesting because on one hand I don't have any perspective because I started so close to when this all started to happen.
Yeah.
So I kind of almost only have a tiny insight into what it was like to work there before this.
Yeah.
So I suppose I contrast it with coming from somewhere, from my own personal thing, coming from a role I'd been in for nearly 5 years in a company I understood very well and being involved in lots of things. So knew kind of how the company worked and knew my stuff, to put it bluntly. Coming into a new role, you're learning. I took it that my learning was going to be actually understanding the company. Like, I get leadership development is what I work in, but it was understanding what that looks like in that company and what that company does. And then 5 weeks into me being there, we were all sent home, and then a day later the UK government sent us into lockdown. So the one thing that has kind of stuck out is I got a gist really quickly in the 5 weeks I was in the office of what my leader was like, my immediate leader, my line manager, what our senior team within HR, corporate HR was, and what the kind of trickle down from the board was, what the culture was trying to be in the company, and what was important, and how they approach things. And I very quickly knew what certain behaviours were. And there's a thing called true hospitality in IHG, which is very simply, we provide true hospitality to every guest.
Yeah.
So that was it was easy things to lock onto. I think since we've been in lockdown, obviously, since March, we haven't been back in the office, and there's no plans for a couple of months, I think.
Right.
So it's been really interesting to see that play out being at home. And I kind of had a conversation with my line manager ages ago, and she was just kind of saying, how are you getting on? And I kind of used the word miracle, and it's a very strong word to use, but to feel kind of as integrated and as welcome and as part of a team, a small, the immediate team, but also the larger team, is miraculous.
I think that just goes to say a lot about the people, right? In terms of
completely. It's very non-hierarchical in a lot of ways, and I think not a lot of ego that I found. I'm sure there is, but that everyone's very open to what you've got to bring to the table and open to people's differences. And again, because I don't have the full perspective of what that was like before, I don't know whether that's partly been driven by the kind of crises that we faced last few months. I have a feeling that it's been heightened, but I have a feeling that that's how people are anyway. So that's kind of my experience so far, I suppose.
Yeah, it's pretty unique, I think, isn't it? Normal turn up and find your laptop and off you go.
yeah, pretty much. And it was very much kind of throwing the deep end when I got there and kind of involved in stuff straight away. So I think it was interesting because I came from somewhere where it was very clear you had an induction, you did this, and this. And it was kind of my first day. It was like, here's your laptop, here's the team, let's get cracking. Yeah. And that was a bit like, oh, okay. But actually it stood me in good stead when 5 weeks later it was like, okay, go home and get cracking. And I didn't have those people the other side of the desk to go, what's this? What are they talking about? And who's that? And why is this person talking to me? So you just got it kind of, I think if I'd been kind of baby steps a little bit as part of like a really structured induction, it might have actually kind of been a little bit of a disservice, I suppose. Yeah. A bit of freewheeling probably helped deal with a freewheeling situation that we then found ourselves. Yeah. I think.
And I think I've probably sort of spoke to you about it before. Like, over the last few months, we've been sharing stories and getting our clients to talk about how they've used great leadership to pull and respond against the challenges that they're facing as organisations. I think some of the stuff I kind of see on the outside about IHG is like you're so focused upon your people, like you just mentioned. I think that's kind of all part, isn't it, from what I understand, about more than just being a nice hotel to go and stay in. But I think you also see that on the outside, right? So you shared that interview with a CBS interview on LinkedIn this week with your chief exec. And I think a lot of that stuff it kind of like the messages that you see coming out just kind of constantly reinforces that piece about caring for your people. Do you get a genuine sense for that?
I really do. And actually, when I was looking to move roles and looked at different companies, is really, I'm someone who I can't work somewhere where I'm not kind of proud of what they do and believe in the kind of culture and values that they espouse. And one of the things that, I was like, great, they want me for an interview, hurrah. But one of the things I watched was the interview that Keith Barr, the CEO, had done with Bloomberg. And they questioned him on operating in countries where maybe equality isn't highest on the agenda and there are cultural differences. And he was very clear about, we're a business, we're there to make money, but if we can get a foot in the door and influence senior people, influence governments about how people are treated and how what things they can do, then that's kind of our responsibility. And I kind of watching him, I kind of was, that's not a spiel, that's actually very important to him. And it was one of the things that made me excited to kind of find out more about IHG. And having started there, he is incredibly people focused. It's very much about, and that's where the true hospitality comes in. That's a great catchphrase. But actually, it's been used in the last few months about what does that actually mean in terms of all the crises that have arisen over the last few months. So it can be something very simple, the true hospitality piece, but actually, if you really think, what does that really mean for every guest that walks through the door of a hotel? What does it mean that they actually have true hospitality? And how do we make sure that that is consistent whilst fulfilling their needs, kind of thing? But it's definitely something that you see very clearly from the top, and very authentic, and a real understanding that for a global company with God knows how many different cultures and types of people that work within there, how do you make sure that the focus is on people across the board? It's something that is I got an authentic piece of that as I was going through the recruitment process, and it's only kind of grown and become more evident as the last few months.
I guess on that point though, I think leaders across the world have had a hell of a job over the last 6 months, haven't they? They've confronted health challenges, economic challenges, racial inequalities, and that's just such a lot on a leader's plate over a short period of time, isn't it? So I just love to hear how IHG leaders have been kind of keeping people inspired during that time, because that's a hell of a job, and to do that all remotely as well is something else.
Yeah, I think there's almost an advantage there's obviously huge disadvantages to being a global company at the moment. But I think one of the advantages that may not be thought about is, as a global company, you spend every day dealing with the differences and complexities in what's happening in different regions. There could be a massive crisis in one specific region that is not affecting anybody else, but that still is part of what's happening in your business and your company. And how you lead people through that crisis is obviously hugely important. So I think there's always that eye in IHG about there is so much going on across the world that could be affecting so many different parts of the business. I think one of the key things for me has just been kind of the constant communication. Really, it's constant, honest communication. I think it's one thing to kind of, you could say any company's done honest communication because there's an email from the CHRO every day or whatever. But actually, it's been very timely, very honest, very upfront communication. And it's been, this is what we're trying to do. This is how good it is. This is how bad it is. These are our plans. And there's been lots of calls with Keith, the CEO, where people have been able to point questions to him. And he's answered those. And if he hasn't been able to answer them, he's come out, kind of sent stuff to everyone to answer it. There's been lots of interaction kind of with kind of the director level. So it it just comes down to that. It sounds really basic, but actually, I think what's happened is this last few months has made people really examine: is the company I'm working for the company that I thought it was? So it's really easy to say you live by these values or have a culture as a company in the best of times or when things are going well. And I think what has been shown is what has been shown at IHG is that in the worst of times, in a crisis, actually those values and that culture is all that has mattered. And as long as we stick to those, that's how we're going to do business. So I think that has been one of the most kind of almost inspiring things, and not shying away from a conversation. So there's a set of what were called growth behaviours. So there was obviously a really, before this hit and it was being talked about when I first started at the end of January, there was kind of a real vision as to how the company was going to grow in the next 5 years. And they've been growing brilliantly in terms of openings, in terms of signings, in terms of everything. Right. And obviously there were 4 behaviours that kind of underpin that. And one of the behaviours that has been talked about quite a lot is a behaviour called talk straight. Right. And I spoke to one of our VPs about this, that I was just talking to her about how I was getting on and kind of saying I've just been blown away by kind of the authentic kind of honesty that's come from leadership. And the talk straight behaviour isn't about kind of that I say it is I talk straight and no matter what anyone thinks. It's kind of the opposite of that. It's kind of we're going to have honest conversations about tough things and we're going to face into things. And I think that behaviour came in, I think, a year ago as part of kind of the growth vision. But actually, it feels like it's embedded within people, and we're going to have these honest conversations, whether it's having a call about what's happening with racial inequalities that's been under the microscope in the last few months, whether it's being really honest about how bad our occupancy rate is in a certain region because we need it. It's been that, and I think that for me has come to the forefront as to the thing that's made people, 2 sides to it. I think it's made people, I think it's reassured people, but I do think it has inspired people in terms of, the company I thought I was working for is the company I was working for. They haven't just done what, being honest, some hotel competitors did and just went, right, everybody on furlough, get at home, get gone. It's been really considered and really all about honesty and people first, to be honest. Yeah.
When the pressure's on as well, you can kind of, culture doesn't hide, does it? It's
completely.
Just there.
Completely.
It's done you a lot of favours during this period.
Yeah, and again, it's difficult to. It's only through conversations I've had with people where they have kind of said it wasn't like that 18 months ago.
Right.
Like there's a different focus because there's a different leadership coming from the top and a different focus on people. So it's all I know, but I do know that that's been a journey for the company and journey for corporate, definitely, that this people piece, and actually it's not just about the bottom line. There's more to it. And actually there's something about being a hotel business that it's not just about a bed for the night. It does become about, a home from home for some people if you're a business traveller, obviously not at the moment, but and having the range of real luxury in terms of some of the brands to your Holiday Inn Express, which is kind of convenience. You cater for every kind of person, therefore you have to be open to every idea and every opportunity. So I think that honest, what can we do and how can we get it done whilst making sure everybody feels looked after is obviously embedded in, because it hasn't wavered since all this.